If you're anything like me, then you love creepy stuff. Creepypastas, disturbing media, even serial killer documentaries have always been a staple in your life. The type of stories that make you stop and think, should I have even listened to that or read that in the first place? That's my shtick. I love that type of stuff. Hello, everybody. Today, I want to tell the story about one of my favorite creepypastas of all time, Borrasca. The very first time I ever listened to this story, I believe I was in like 5th or 6th grade. Shout out Mr. Creepypasta, you still doing it. Like a decade later, bro, you were crazy. And even now, almost 11 years later, I cannot recall a story that took me by my ankles and dragged me in quite like Borrasca. There's a first time for everything, and I believe, if memory serves me correctly, that Borrasca was the first disturbing horror story that ever truly stuck with me. In today's video, I want to take a look back at Borrasca and also look at the newest addition to the series, Part 5. Although Part 5 came out years ago, it is still the newest addition, and I never actually sat down and read it. I'm going to be breaking down the story, the characters within the story, and the plot for those who just don't want to sit down and read it. I unfortunately am not very good at mimicking voices, so the majority of the time I will not read the story word for word, but there are some parts in the story that I am going to include because of how good it is. It would do the story disservice if I didn't include parts of it, such as really good dialogue or really good world building. And this also just gives me an excuse to read the story again, which I am incredibly excited to do. And before we get into the meat and potatoes, the actual story, I have to put a disclaimer first. This story is horrible. There are scenes of child abuse, sexual abuse, and violence. So if any of that makes you squirmish, I recommend turning back now before you get in too deep. Luckily, this story isn't insanely extreme. So if this is your first story that involves these disturbing elements, I think you'll be okay. After all, this was the story that got me into disturbing stories all of those years ago when I was a kid. It's kind of tame, but still, proceed with caution, because whenever it does hit you, it slaps you in the face and it makes you really think. I also have to say this too. Borrasca is split up into 5 parts. The first part, the majority of the characters are all children, 8 to 9 years old. So whenever I'm reading dialogue, you know, I'm a 22-year-old male. I'm not 9 years old. So yeah, just understand that a lot of the dialogue that I'm going to read in the first part is from a 9-year-old, right? So even though you hear my voice and there's like a bass in my voice, just understand it's a 9-year-old. But with that being said, let's begin. It's a long story, but one you've never heard before. This story is about a place that dwells on the mountain, a place where bad things happen. And you may think you know about the bad things. You may decide you have it all figured out, but you don't. Because the truth is worse than monsters or men. Our story starts off with a 9-year-old boy. He says he and his family are going to be moving to some little town in the Ozarks, Missouri. The boy's big sister, Whitney, is not too delighted about this. She cried and pleaded to her parents to not move. And when that didn't work, she cursed at them and slammed things around the house. The boy says he blamed his dad for moving, and he heard whispers that his dad did something wrong. Something so wrong that he had to be reassigned to another sheriff's office in an out-of-the-way county to save face. So the dad is a cop, and he did something so bad that he had to get reassigned to a different county as a fresh start. Large quotation marks around that fresh start bit. The boy, however, did not mind all that much. He was 9 after all, so to him, moving was like a new adventure. New house, new school, new friends. But Whitney, she felt the opposite. She didn't want to leave her friends and her new boyfriend, but when the family pulled up to their new house in Drisking, Missouri, she was sitting right next to him. The boy says they moved to Drisking in the summer, and we also learned that they previously lived in St. Louis, so they moved from St. Louis to Drisking. Drisking was built in a mountain valley surrounded by healthy forest with walking trails and crystal clear lakes. I was 9, it was summer, and this was heaven. They'd only been in town for a week when their next door neighbors came to introduce themselves, Mr. and Mrs. Landy, with their 10-year-old son, Kyle. The boy describes Kyle as a lanky redhead, which is Freaking rude. It's so mean. The boy and Kyle had hit it off immediately and soon became best friends. He says they spent the cool summer morning outside exploring the Ozarks and the hot afternoons in his living room playing PS2. Kyle soon introduced the boy to the only other kid in the neighborhood, a skinny, quiet girl named Kimber DeStero. Kimber is described as shy but friendly and up for anything. She kept up with the two boys and quickly became their third member. The three created a trio of sorts, and they were inseparable. The boy says his dad was at work all the time, and his mom was consumed with their new friendships, so the summer was theirs for the taking. Kyle and Kimber showed him where all the best hiking trails were, and which lakes were the best, and by the time the first day of school rolled around, the boy knew he was home. On the last Saturday before school started, Kyle and Kimber told the boy they needed to take him somewhere special, somewhere they haven't been yet. The Triple Tree. What's a triple tree?
It's a totally awesome, totally huge tree house out in the woods.
Whatever, Kyle. Come on, you guys. If there is a frickin' tree house, you would have showed me already.
Nuh-uh. We wouldn't have. There's a ceremony for first-timers and everything.
Yep, it's true, Sam. If you enter the treehouse without the proper ceremony, you'll disappear, then you'll die.
Yeah, we'll show you. We just have to get a knife for the ceremony and we'll go.
What? Why do you need a knife? Is it a blood ceremony?
No way! You just say some words and carve your name into the triple tree.
Yep, it takes like 1 minute.
And with that, the trio was off. But not before Kyle insisting that the boy use the same knife he used during his own ceremony. So they had to run over to Kyle's house real quick to grab Kyle's knife. Unfortunately, however, Mrs. Landy just so happened to be home with her youngest son, Parker. And despite Kyle's many objections, his mother insisted he take his 6-year-old little brother with him.
Mom, we're going to the treehouse. It's only for older kids. Parker can't go.
I don't care if you're going to see an Exorcist movie marathon. You're taking your brother with you. I need a break, Kyle. Can't you understand that?
Parker, put your shoes on. We're leaving now.
The boy says the youngest Landy, Parker, was unlike his older brother, where Kyle was a wild, excitable fireball with hair to match. Parker was an anxious, fidgety boy with small eyes and dark brown hair. They pulled up to the trail and leaned their bikes against a wooden signpost which read West Rim Prescott Ore Trail. Why are so many trails around here named Prescott? Is this Prescott Mountain or something?
No, dummy. It's because of the Prescotts. You know, the family that lives in the mansion up on Fairmont. Mr. Prescott and his son Jimmy own like half the business in town.
Did they start this town?
Nah, mining started the town. I think that... I want to go home. You can't go home. Mom said I had to bring you. Come on, it's like a 2-mile walk.
Kyle says the Prescotts own the hardware store, the pharmacy, Glitton's on Second, and even the town's newspaper. But they do not own the GameStop in town. Thank God. After an exchange of words with his brother, Parker was visibly upset until a charming Kimber stuck her hand out and wiggled her fingers at him. Parker took her hand and they began hiking up the trail. The boy says the treehouse was the biggest one he had ever seen. It had multiple rooms and it actually had curtains in the window with a sign above the door that said Ambercott Fort. The treehouse also had a rope ladder hanging from the entrance. I know if I was 9 years old, I would probably kill somebody to have a treehouse like this.
I'm going first.
You have to do the ceremony first or you'll disappear.
That'd be fun with me.
Give me the knife.
There's some space in the back to carve your name.
The boy held out his hand, to which Kyle dug the switchblade out of his pocket. The boy examined the large tree. There were so many names on the tree that he had to crouch down and carve his name near the bottom since he couldn't reach any higher. And here is where we finally learn our main character's name, Sam Walker. Alright, let's go!
Wait! You have to say the words first.
Oh yeah? Okay, what are they?
Underneath the triple tree, there is a man who waits for me, and should I go or should I stay? My fate's the same either way.
That's creepy. What does it mean?
No one knows anymore. It's just tradition.
And after a handful of tries, Sam and Parker recite the poem correctly. After reciting the poem, the group immediately climbed the rope ladder to the treehouse. He says it was more or less empty, just a dirty rug here and some trash there. He surveyed all of the rooms and found nothing of real interest until he entered the last one. An old mattress lay in the corner and piles of musty, ripped clothes scattered the floor.
Did a hobo live here?
Nah, this room has been like this for as long as I can remember.
Kimber walked into the threshold of the room, but refused to go any further.
It's not the smell that freaks me out, it's that.
Kimber pointed up to a message written in the ceiling. Road to the gates of hell. Mile marker 1.
What does it mean?
It's just older kids being dicks. Come on, I'll show you the best part of the treehouse.
Reading this story back and already knowing like what happens in the story, that message, road to the gates of hell, mile marker 1, is crazy and very accurate. The group walked back into the first room, to which Parker stood up and smiled at them. He pointed down to what he'd clumsily carved in the wooden floor.
Fart. That's hilarious, Parker.
Kyle rolled his eyes, but his little brother didn't pick up on the sarcasm and smiled proudly. Kyle took the knife from his brother and wedged it between 2 planks of the wooded wall and pulled out 2 cans of Miller Lite beer.
Ew, warm beer? That's gross. How did you even know it was there?
Phil Sonder told me.
Are we gonna drink it?
Hell yeah, we're gonna drink it.
Hell yeah! Kimber took the first sip while pinching her nose. Sam took the second sip but retched it up, and foul yellow liquid went all over his shirt. The group spent the next hour and a half drinking the 2 cans of Miller Lite, and when the last drop of beer was consumed, they spent the next 20 minutes trying to determine if they were drunk. While Kyle assured the group that he was wasted, Kimber wasn't so sure. They began doing drunk tests, and while Kimber was in the middle of reciting the alphabet backwards, which, by the way, I can't do sober, and I don't think that that's even like a real drunk test, and if it is, that's insane. A loud metallic grinding suddenly pierced the calm mountain like a gunshot. The group stared at one another and waited for the noise to end, and after what seemed like 10 minutes, the sound finally ended.
What was that?
It's nothing. We hear it sometimes in town. It's not a big deal. It's just louder up here.
But what's making that sound?
Borrasca.
Who's that?
Not who, where. It's a place in the woods.
Bad things happen there.
Like what?
Bad things.
They did the thing! They did the thing where they say the title in the story, and just like that, the group left, climbing down the ladder, one by one. There was an unfamiliar silence while they were walking back to the trailhead. The group was shaken.
So, who lives there?
Where?
Borrasca.
The skinned men.
Like men who were skinned? Their skin is gone?
Yeah, that's what some kids say. Most of us stopped believing in that, though, when we turned double digits.
Sam looked at Kimber, who was staring down the trail, ignoring the group. Kimber is the most shaken out of all of them. She doesn't like the idea of Borrasca, and whenever she hears the noise from Borrasca and the group begin talking about Borrasca, she acts differently and kind of shuts down. Whether this is some little girl scared of some local urban legend or she actually knows something that the others do not, is up to you to decide. But Kimber, being the most shaken of the group when Borrasca is mentioned, definitely fits the story, and you will see why soon. They finally reached their bikes, and they were giggling, trying to decide if they were too drunk to bike home. So we get our first mention of Borrasca and the treehouse. It's revealed that bad things happen at Borrasca, and there is occasionally a metallic-like grinding noise that fills pretty much the entire nearby mountain when it occurs. Oh, and there are like skinned men there too, like men who don't have skin on their bodies. Something bad is going on there, and it seems like Kimber may know a little more information on the place than the others. But that's all we get for right now. Let's continue. School started 2 days later, and Sam had completely forgotten about Borrasca.
As your father, I get the privilege of giving you a hug and telling you to have a good first day of school. But Dad, I gotta go meet Kyle by the flag before the first bell. And you will. But give me a hug first. In a few years, you'll be driving yourself to school. Let me be your dad while I still can.
Ah, what a fantastic father. I'm sure he's very loving and will stay like this for the remainder of the story. The boy hugged his father and threw open the door of his cruiser before his father could say anything more, and ran as his father laughed behind him. Kyle and Kimber were already waiting for Sam at the flagpole. She was wearing a red sweater and leggings with frogs on them. Kimber's drip throughout the story is unmatched. Kimber has so much sauce throughout this story, it's crazy. Her curly orange hair was brushed into ringlets and her wet lips were pink and shiny. She had never looked prettier, and I was surprised to realize I'd never really seen Kimber as a girl.
Whose class are you in?
Mr. Diamond's.
Me too.
Lucky, I'm in Mrs. Verdi's. Only 2 4th grade teachers and I get the crappy one?
Yeah, my mom had her when she was a kid.
What's wrong with her? What did she say?
Just that she's strict and gives out homework on the weekend.
On the weekends? Fuck!
Excuse me, Mr. Landy.
Sorry, sir. I meant dang.
I'm sure you did. Hi, Sheriff Cleary. Well, hello, Sammy. Are you excited for your first day?
Sam immediately recognized the tall man that had suddenly appeared behind the white-faced Kyle. Sheriff Clary crossed his arms in front of him and widened his stance imposingly, but gave Sam a wide smile. Seems like a stand-up guy. I'm sure he isn't harboring some horrible secret that would completely ruin his and his whole town's reputation. Yeah. Sam says Sheriff Clary is his dad's boss, and even though he'd only met him a few times, he liked him, and Sheriff Clary liked Sam back. It's revealed that Clary was there to give a presentation to the 5th and 6th graders about safety when walking to and from school, which is ironic. Eventually, Clary nodded at Sam, turned, and walked away. Sam then looked around and noticed that Kimber was gone, to which Kyle says she took off. She is annoyingly on time to everything, and as if to illustrate his point, the bell rang. I need to start reading stories more than one time because once you know like what's going on, you see things you don't catch on the first read. Particularly this situation, Kimber. On the first listen, I never realized how weird Kimber was acting in the treehouse and on the trail. And then the first time she ever gets introduced to Sheriff Clary, well, not introduced, but whenever she gets near Sheriff Clary, she runs off. Kyle chalks this up to her just being annoyingly on time for everything, but after the story, this interaction may imply something completely different, and at the very least hints to the reader that something might be up with Clary. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Kimber gets a bad vibe, I get a bad vibe. I like Kimber, so yeah, automatic bad vibes for me, right? I think Kimber knew or had an idea of what was going on in this town before any of her friends had any idea. And that is something I did not catch on the first read at all. Or it could just be me being stupid and looking too deep into stuff. I don't know, whatever. Sam walked into class and saw that Kimber saved him a spot next to her. Sam's teacher introduced himself to Sam, and from a brief conversation between the two, we learned that, if it wasn't already very obvious, the town that Sam and his family moved to was incredibly small. So small, in fact, that it is implied that Sam is the only new kid in class. This is an insane concept to me. I grew up in a city, right? So every single year I had just a bunch of different kids. Kimber introduced him to other kids in class, which usually just ended with an unimpressed okay. However, a group of girls at the front of the class snuck looks at Sam and Kimber all morning. And during second break, the group of girls came up and talked to Sam. And I have to read this part out because it's just fantastic, and it really lets you all see the dynamic between Kimber and the two boys.
Are you friends with Kimber DeStero?
Yeah.
Are you related to her?
No. You don't have to be friends with her, you know.
I want to be friends with her. Well, if you do, you're going to be in the ugly kid group, and once you're in that group, you can't leave it. Ever.
Better than the bitch group.
We'll see.
Sam then walked back over to Kimber and sat down next to her, feeling like a badass. It was the first time he'd ever used a swear word in front of anybody other than Kyle.
What did they say to you?
They said you're too pretty to be near them, and that you make them look gross, so we have to stay away from them.
That was legendary. That was good. I need to put him on the Chad list for that. Chad list, and congratulations, Sam. You are officially on the Chad list. Good for you, buddy. The rest of the day is pretty uneventful, but Sam learns that his sister Whitney is actually dating a new guy with the last name Whittaker. To which Kyle laughs and remarks,
Your sister is dating a Whittaker.
"Shut up, Kyle." It seems like the Whittaker name has some sort of stigma to it, but it doesn't play a huge part in the story. It's more or less just to give Kyle some more personality, I think. The story then fast forwards about a month when Sam hears someone mention the Skinned Men again. One day the kids were out on the playground at school when a distant sound of metal grinding on metal flooded over the playground, silencing everyone.
Borrasca.
Yep, the Skinned Men kill again.
Hey, Kyle said only babies believed in skinned men.
They do. Phil is just stupid.
Phil begins to scan the playground and calls over a blonde girl. He says this is Danielle, and she has in fact seen the Skinned Men before. Phil tells Danielle to tell the boys about the Skinned Men, but Danielle says she never saw the Skinned Men. Her sister Paige saw the Skinned Men, but unfortunately, we learn from Kyle that Paige disappeared 4 years ago, to which Phil adds after she saw the Skinned Men, of course. This makes Sam incredibly interested in Borrasca, so much so that he made sure he was lined up behind Phil when the bell rang. He asks Phil what else he knows about Borrasca, and Phil says his brother said that that's where people go when they disappear. And he also says that bad things happen in Borrasca.
The year dragged on, and it wasn't until Christmas break that I heard the machine at Borrasca again. It was December, and there was a thick blanket of snow on the ground which only served to amplify the noise from the mountain. I sat in my room listening to it for a few minutes, trying to decide what was happening in the place that bad things happen. I saw my dad's cruiser pull up out the window and went downstairs to greet him. As I passed my sister's door, I heard her giggling in that annoying teenage girl way, and I cringed. I hope Kimber never got like that.
I love that sentence. I sat in my room listening to it for a few minutes, trying to decide what happened in the place that bad things happen. Oftentimes, your imagination can conjure up some of the most terrifying scenarios and images imaginable. I think that's why we fear the dark, because our imagination is allowed to run rampant. We don't know what the darkness holds, so our mind fills in those gaps, and more often than not, the things we imagine are much worse than what the darkness holds. But I think in this particular situation, not even one's imagination can come up with the horrors that Borrasca holds for these children. I know my little 6th grade brain couldn't at the time. Sam says he hasn't seen his dad lately because he has been working so much, but he doesn't know what his dad has been doing since they live in the quietest, lamest town ever. Sam asks his dad if he ever hears the machine sounding noise, referring to the grinding metal that comes from the Skinned Men at Borrasca. At least that's what Sam thinks. He believes that the machine grinding metal is due to some of the Skinned Men that are currently in Borrasca. Okay, that's all we really know of Borrasca at this point in time. His dad says he hears it in town every now and then, and it comes from private property up in the Ozarks, most likely from logging equipment or something like that. Sam continues the questioning though, and asks his dad about Borrasca and the Skinned Men. But his dad eventually gets fed up with his questioning and begins to discipline Whitney, as he believes she is the one telling Sam all these tales about Borrasca and the Skinned Men. Nothing more comes from it, and eventually Christmas came and went with a surprising smoothness. Sam and Whitney got everything they had on their list, and Sam remarks that even though the town may be smaller, Dad's paychecks were clearly bigger. The first day back to school after Christmas, Sam wore his new Rams parka, and Kimber showed off her new blue pearl necklace her mom got her for Christmas. But right when the group was about to split up, Kimber was slammed from the side. One of the girls from the group that was talking to Sam on the first day slammed into Kimber and made her fall down. The group of girls began to walk away, laughing. We learn that this girl's name is Phoebe Dranger, and she doesn't play a huge role in the overarching story, but you'll see. You'll see what happens to her.
You're bad people who make poor life choices. When I'm your boss someday, I'll make you clean bathrooms.
Yeah! And if Kyle's your boss, you know you messed up.
But while Kyle and Sam were celebrating their victory, I guess you can call it victory, Kimber was holding back tears.
Don't sweat those girls, Kimber. Nobody likes them. People are just nice to them because they're related to the Prescotts.
Alright, so we have a couple of pieces of information to play around with right now. First, Sam's dad has been working a lot, which is weird for such a small town. I mean, why is a cop working double shifts in a town that has basically nothing going on in it? Second, the Prescotts are a big name in Drisking, so big in fact that people often act differently around them just to please them. And third, there is an urban legend floating around Drisking about this place called Borrasca and the Skinned Men. Apparently, the Skinned Men live in Borrasca, and bad things happen there. And this urban legend is most likely somehow connected with the Triple Tree, a large tree somewhere in the mountains with a treehouse on it. The kids around Drisking believe if you want to enter the treehouse, you must carve your name into the tree and recite a creepy poem. Undoubtedly, all of this is connected somehow, but we don't know how quite yet. After all of this takes place, Kyle then says there is no class until after lunch because there is an assembly in the auditorium. The boys enter the auditorium and find Kimber had stopped crying and save them both seats in the back of the room. Mrs. Verdi walked onto the stage and says that today's presentation is from the Historic Preservation Society of Drisking. Kyle and Kimber remark that this is incredibly weird that Jimmy Prescott is doing the presentation and not his dad, Thomas Prescott. According to Kyle, Thomas Prescott has done this presentation every year for like 20 years. But then a boy behind them says that Thomas went crazy like a year ago, and he didn't do the presentation last year either. The presentation was slow and uneventful until Jimmy Prescott took the stage. He talked about the story of his family's early journey to the town and is described by Sam to be extremely charismatic and entertaining. So much so that Sam, to Kyle's disagreement, stating that Sam is committing social suicide, asks Jimmy a question in the middle of his presentation.
Mr. Prescott, why did the mines close? Like, what happened?
Jimmy says that most of the mines were closed in 1951 after a long period of unprofitability. The mountain had simply ran out of ore, so the mills and refineries were abandoned, and in extension, the town. Families moved away, stores closed, and Drisking became a ghost town. Jimmy then says if it wasn't for stubborn families like the Prescotts who refused to leave, that would have been the end of this town. But through many years of hard work, they were able to create the picturesque little haven in the Ozarks that it is today. After a very awkward Q&A, the kids were released into the cafeteria and the group sat in their usual corner. Kyle reveals that all of the mines in the mountains were blown up and nobody can enter them anymore. Kimber then says that some kids died after going into the mines, so the city set off some controlled blasts to make the caverns inaccessible. But they messed up and blew up the water table and poisoned it or something like that. Kyle and Kimber also say that they do not like Jimmy Prescott all that much, or at least give hints to that. They see him as creepy, which is completely valid. The kids then have a very pleasant interaction with one another, laughing about C4 in the water or something like that. I want y'all to remember Drisking blew up the mines and messed up their water. It's very important for this story. Sam even says, I remember thinking in that moment that I was happy here in Drisking, Missouri, with these two people, happier than I'd ever been anywhere else. However, in the next sentence, he says, it was the last truly happy moment I ever had. Less than an hour later, Mr. Diamond, his teacher, gets a phone call and tells Sam to go pack his things and go to the front office. He's going home for the day. When he reached the front office, he saw his mother crying. Sam was too afraid to ask her why she was crying. And when they finally got home, his mom parked the car a block from their house because their house was blocked by several police cars. Sam's mother reveals that Whitney, Sam's older sister, never made it to school this morning. Sam says that Whitney most likely just ditched because he saw her with her friends before she left for school. But his mother says that her friends dropped her off at Circle K near the high school and left her there, and nobody has seen her since. Which, by the way, horrible friends. If she is in fact going to Circle K to like ditch school or something like that, you gotta ditch with her. You can't just drop her off, you know what I mean? Like, come on, man. What are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? What's going on? Sam's mother says that the police as well as Sam's father believe that Whitney is with Jay, her old boyfriend in St. Louis. Half of her clothes were missing, along with some cash that belonged to their dad, and the police think Whitney hitched a ride to St. Louis and are currently trying to get in contact with the boy's parents. Sam walked into the house to find his dad understandably strained. He was staring at Whitney's phone records. Sam tells his dad that he doesn't think Whitney would just up and leave. Plus, she has a new boyfriend. Although he cannot think of a time that Whitney actually confirmed she was dating the Whitaker boy, he doesn't think Whitney would just leave and go back to her ex. The dad, however, ultimately dismisses this and says that a teenage girl's mind is a complicated thing, and Sam should head up to his room and let the police work. Sam says no. He wants to stay downstairs and help the police, but after repeated begging, Sam's dad barks at Sam to go to his room. Sam's pissed and is now sitting on his bed, feeling helpless, worthless, and scared for his sister. Sam spent the rest of the day thinking about the place Whitney could be, and when the sun finally began to set, Sam got out of bed and checked his email, expecting to see a bunch of messages from Kyle and Kimber. But when he checked, he only saw one. Did she go to the treehouse? Sam stared at the screen for a moment when Kimber's words from last fall echoed in his brain.
If you enter the treehouse without the proper ceremony, you'll disappear, then you'll die.
You see, Sam didn't believe this. He didn't believe any of this. He didn't believe Whitney would just leave like that. He says, nothing they were saying downstairs makes any sense if you knew my sister. Sam then says maybe she and her boyfriend had went to the treehouse to make out or something, and maybe he left her there. Or she got lost, or maybe the skin man got her. But whatever it was, he had to go find out for himself. So Sam sneaks out, gets his bike out the garage, and rode 3 miles to the West Rim Prescott Ore Trail. Gotta respect it, man. Gotta respect it. When he got there, he saw 2 bikes already locked to the signpost, with his 2 best friends sitting in the snow next to them.
I knew you'd come,
Kyle said as Kimber ran up and hugged Sam. They began up the trail, with Sam remarking that the hike was much harder than last time due to the snow. When the tree came into view, Sam ran up to it calling his sister's name, and Kyle ran up to the rope ladder and entered the treehouse, but they did not find any sign of her. And then Sam heard Kimber quietly say his name from where she stood, staring at the triple tree. Sam ran over and followed her eyes and saw it, freshly carved near the top, Whitney W. Sam's breath froze in his chest as tears began to form. And as the sun took its last desperate breath before plunging into the horizon, a deafening, metallic whirl sang out from the wilderness and spilled down the mountainside. That concludes part 1 of Borrasca and sets the stage for the rest of the story. To recap, a kid Sam and his family moved from St. Louis to a small town in the Ozarks, somewhere in Missouri, due to something his dad did. After moving, Sam quickly becomes friends with some kids named Kyle and Kimber, who introduce him to the Triple Tree and informs him of an urban legend called Borrasca and the skin men, which piques Sam's interest a lot. We also learn that there is a ceremony one must perform in order to enter the Triple Tree, and if they don't, then they will disappear. The ceremony seems to be connected to the urban legend of Borrasca, but so far, there have been no confirmations. As time goes on, Sam's sister, Whitney, mysteriously vanishes, and while the police believe she went back to St. Louis to be with her old boyfriend, Sam doesn't believe this. He thinks the Triple Tree may have something to do with her disappearance, and upon further investigation, he sees Whitney's name carved into the Triple Tree, which means that she did do the ceremony. So it couldn't have been that, right? Or could it? And that's where part 1 ends, and we're left with more questions than answers. We start with Sam, asleep. Jimmy Prescott walked into the store and woke Sam up saying,
You know, I worked here when I was a kid too. I installed the bell on the door for this very reason. Didn't seem to wake you up though.
Late night?
Kinda.
I hope you weren't out at the bonfires with all the other underage drinkers.
No, sir.
He was. He's a liar. Jimmy says he's at the store for a sandwich, and Sam agrees to make it for him, thankful that the conversation was finally over. Part 2 occurs some years in the future, and Sam has landed himself a job at none other than the local sandwich shop owned by the Prescotts. Jimmy then asks Sam if a woman named Mira was there, and Sam says she's in the back. This woman, Mira, is the manager of the sandwich shop, and when Sam goes to get her from the back, she sends Sam home for the day and pays him. Sam describes Mira as a burdened, stressed out woman, but she never failed to be unbelievably kind, but also says there's a hopelessness about her, a sadness that she hid very well. Bro, like, I would be sad too if I was Mira. I'd be sad as well. I think I'd be sad too. Sam left through the back door to avoid Jimmy Prescott calling him a total tool, and texted Kyle once he got back to his car. Kyle answered immediately and told Sam to come meet him at Crystal Lake, Sam's favorite place in all of Driskin. Sam had to park almost a mile away from the lake because it was so packed, and he eventually walked over and found Kyle and Kimber sitting on a rock. After some words back and forth, we learned that Sam was recovering from a hangover and urged Kyle to let him borrow his "no one can tell where my eyes are looking" sunglasses. Kyle refused at first, but folded after Kimber stroked his arm for a second. It's revealed that Kyle and Kimber are dating now. I guess over the years, they've grown to really like one another. Sam began to look at the girls on the beach below. Phoebe Dranger and her round-faced friends were lying on some towels, giggling, while Sam peeped. Sam remarks that it's weird seeing the two of them without the girl with the rude nose. The three of them had always been inseparable, but Christy, rude nose girl, fell in love with some college kid and ran away. These three girls that Sam is talking about right here are the same group of girls that told Sam he would be part of the ugly kid group if he was friends with Kimber all those years ago. And apparently, one of them fell in love and ran off with a boy. Kimber asks Sam why he left work early, and Sam says Prescott came in. And it's clear from the dialogue the opinion that Kimber and Kyle hold about Jimmy Prescott are still negative, even years later. And this stigmatism about Prescott has also seemed to consume Sam too. If you remember correctly back in part 1, young Sam seemed mesmerized by the man the first time he saw him during the school's presentation. But it seems like Sam's opinion on Prescott has changed over time. And this is confirmed with the very next thing Sam says. While Sam and Kimber are talking about Mira in a sandwich shop, he says, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's going to get chewed out. I really don't like that guy." He's talking about Prescott here, and also adds, "I thought about the squirmy yellow-eyed freak yelling at sweet little Mira, and it made my blood boil." Something is clearly off-putting about Prescott, and while in part 1, the kids seem to only give slight hints that they dislike him, in part 2, it almost seems like all three of them just flat out hate the guy. Kyle says that Sam should have met Tom Prescott, Jimmy Prescott's dad, and from the way that Kyle describes him as a piece of work, it's safe to say Tom isn't much better than his son. However, the worser of the two still seems to be Jimmy. Kimber then reveals that Tom Prescott was put in a home a few towns over because he got dementia, and he was embarrassing the family in public. And as she says this, Phil Saunders and another guy named Mike Sutton randomly pops out the bushes behind the group. Mike offers Sam a hit off his pipe, and Sam agrees before Phil swats Sam's hand away and says, "Careful, guy. You don't want to get the sheriff's son high, for fuck's sake, Mike." Mike then apologizes to Sam and says the only reason he is smoking around him is because today is his cousin's death anniversary. About 5 years ago, Mike's cousin Hannah mysteriously disappeared in the woods, never to be seen again. Another girl who has mysteriously gone missing. Phil then goes on a very typical stonerish hippie-like rant to which Kyle says,
"You're fucking high, Saunders."
"We all are, man. We all are. Everyone in this town is drinking the fucking Kool-Aid." This whole interaction is hilarious. I really like Phil's character in this story. Phil is fantastic. Even though he's not a big character, he only has like maybe 4 lines of dialogue. Each one is fire. Then the conversation gets a bit serious. They begin talking about all the people that have gone missing from the town until Whitney, Sam's sister, is mentioned by Phil. Phil and Mike ask Sam if he thinks his sister actually ran away to St. Louis, and this piqued the interest of Kimber and Kyle. It seems like during this time skip, Sam hasn't talked about Whitney's disappearance to Kyle and Kimber at all, and out of respect, Kyle and Kimber never pursued the subject further, but they are clearly very curious on what Sam thinks about it all. Sam reveals to us that this is 7 years later, which makes Sam about 16 years old at this point in the story. During these last 7 years, Sam put on a facade that he was quietly grieving and that he'd put the whole incident behind him. But in reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. You see, Sam waited years for Jay, Whitney's ex from St. Louis, to pop up on social media. And when Sam finally found him last year, he confirmed that Jay was just a normal teenage boy with his ex-girlfriend Whitney, the furthest thing from his mind. Upon finding this out, Sam was devastated and showed the evidence to his father. However, after being presented this, Sam's father shut the door to his office and cried for hours, as Sam waited around for him to reopen the case on Whitney's disappearance. But this never came. Instead, his father never really talked about it again. And Sam never told Kimber and Kyle any of this. How could he? How could he tell them? How could he tell his two best friends that he was obsessed with the idea of Borrasca and the Skinned Men? After confirming that Whitney is in fact not with her ex in St. Louis, Sam is now certain that Whitney's death happened in Borrasca, the same death that befell all of the others that had gone to the Triple Tree. It is incredibly weird how many people, specifically girls, have gone missing in Drisking over the years. Alright, let's unpack this a little bit. Part 2 takes place 7 years in the future from Part 1, and it's here that we learn Whitney did in fact not run away to be with her boyfriend in St. Louis. Well, ex-boyfriend. Sam brought this information to his father, but nothing came from it. His dad just kind of sat around and cried about it instead of opening the case back up and figuring out what truly happened to his daughter. Sam still believes that Borrasca, the Skinned Men, and the Triple Tree are somehow linked to Whitney's death, but he doesn't quite know how yet. But one thing is for certain, Sam is now obsessed with the idea of Borrasca and the Skinned Men. Let's move on. Sam tells the group that he believes Whitney just ran off with her ex from St. Louis, hiding his obsession of Borrasca. Phil and Mike end up leaving the three, with Phil like spraying sand over a couple of freshman girls that were at the beach in like a flirty way. How do you spray sand? Whatever. I don't know how you can spray. I guess like maybe kick sand at them. It doesn't matter. Kimber tells Kyle that she has to leave and reveal that her parents have been fighting a lot and she can't leave her mom alone for too long because she is depressed and also fighting with her dad. Kimber gets up to leave while saying that tomorrow starts the last day of school. Hell yeah. Sam says that Monday is sophomore ditch day, a tradition at their high school. But Sam, being the son of a cop, he can't really partake in it, especially because they're cutting back on it this year. Sam goes home and exchanges a couple words with his dad about sophomore ditch day tomorrow. Whatever, doesn't really matter. As he was walking towards his room, he passes Whitney's door and says the lights were on in her room, accompanied with silence. Apparently, his mom had been spending a lot of time in Whitney's room since her death, grieving. Sam does end up going to school the next day, along with Kyle and Kimber, because they felt bad for Sam, and like good friends, they went too. I must say, Kyle and Kimber are fantastic friends. They waited for God knows how long in the darkness and snow by the Triple Tree for Sam the day his sister disappeared because they had a gut feeling that's the first place Sam would look. That's friendship right there. That's friendship if I've ever seen it. Sam goes through the day normally with nothing of interest really happening other than a cop walking from classroom to classroom getting attendance sheets to see who is ditching. Sam and Kyle go out to the parking lot to smoke, and Kyle reveals that Kimber left school around 4th period to go home and take care of her mom. Kyle then comes up with the fantastic idea of leaving school for the day. He says,
I mean, you put in 4 periods, you've been a good son, and Officer Dickass already came around and collected the attendance sheets.
Dickass? Really? You're better than that, man.
Officer Ass Dick?
You're fucking baked, Kyle.
Kyle convinced Sam to take him to Kimber's house, even though Kimber's mother wasn't the biggest fan of Kyle. And after a quick stop at GameStop and Drisking Games and Media, Sam goes into work early in hopes that Mira would let him leave early. Upon entering Mira's office, Sam sees her slumped over a pile of receipts and paperwork, crying. She began to vent to Sam, saying that ever since she started managing the store, it's been in the red, and Mr. Prescott refuses to let her put signs up to advertise the store. Not knowing what else to do, Sam leaves Mira's office and calls her husband, Owen, to come check up on her. When Owen gets there, it's clear that this situation wasn't new to him. It seems that Mira has been stressed out like this and crying for a very long time before this point. Sam tells Owen the store is going bankrupt, to which Owen says that's part of the reason Mira is upset, although he doesn't think Jimmy Prescott would allow the store to close anyway. He then says the main reason she is so upset is because they have been trying to get pregnant for years, and Mira blames Owen for all their problems. Owen describes Mira's need for a baby as an obsession. She needs to get pregnant. Owen believes this is because she wants to save her last name. Her father is dead, and her 4 uncles with the last name all died in a mining accident on the mountain some time back. These are the 4 people that went into the mines and died, which got the mines closed down in the first place. We learn this later on in the story and it will be revealed, but I'm just going to say it out right now. These are the same 4 people that went into the mines, died inside of the mines, which caused Drisking to have enough of it and just close the mines down. Of course, upon hearing death and mountains, Sam's interest gets piqued. Sam then asks Owen if he knows anything about the Skinned Men, or Borrasca. Owen begins to write Sam off as just a dumb kid before Mira walks in and tells Owen that she wants to do it and she called him, which is very cryptic. Let's move on. Owen tells Sam to head home early for the day, and Sam, without hesitation, leaves and calls Kyle. Kyle says he's by Kimber's and to come pick him up. When Sam pulls up, Kyle is sitting out on the curb. Kimber's mom kicked Kyle out again. Now, throughout the story, it is a common theme of Kimber's parents hating Kyle, when Kyle seemingly has done nothing wrong. Now, sure, like Kyle could have like destroyed something in the house. He is kind of wild, but he's also respectful. He's not a maniac, right? Like he's not an animal. So it's kind of weird, this part. And I talk about it more later on, but I first want to say that I want to say that right now. Kimber came out to meet Sam and Kyle and tell them goodbye right before a crash can be heard coming from inside the house, to which Kimber goes back inside to attend to her mom. I'd also like to mention Kimber's dad. It doesn't seem like he's inherently a bad guy from the information we get. It seems like he's just our normal dad, and it seems like Kimber's mom is the one who's not doing very well for some reason. But I absolutely hate Kimber's dad, and you're gonna see why soon. Sam talks to Kyle about what happened at the shop and asks him if he knows about Mira's uncle, who died on the mountain. More specifically, he asks, do you think the McCaskey's death have anything to do with the other disappearances? Remember, Mira's 4 uncles died within the mines, which made the town of Drisking close the mines permanently. And this marks the start of probably what I would say the group's descent into hell. They begin asking questions that most people wouldn't want to know the answers to.
I don't know, man. I mean, maybe if the disappearances started around the same time?
How can we find that out?
Maybe the cops? There have to be police reports.
Okay, but what if I couldn't ask my dad? What about, like, records? The historical society people, maybe?
Kyle agrees, saying they could try them, but then asks Sam why he is so interested. Why is he doing this? To which Sam responds with just 2 words. Just Whitney. And without another word, Kyle was in. They went to the Historical Society people's office and found a small woman typing away at a computer. She asks how she can help them, and they ask for information about the McCaskey kids, specifically how they died. The lady, who introduces herself as Catherine, says they died probably due to starvation or dehydration after they got lost down in some mines in 1953. Once again, the McCaskey kids are Mira's dead uncles that died within the mines, that made the mines get shut down in the first place. She then says a year later, the mine officially closed after a legal spat between the city and the Prescott family, who is spending boatloads of money trying to find the McCaskey kids. She says the Prescotts and McCaskey family were closely related, and Tom Prescott was paying teams of unemployed miners to go down and search for their bodies. The city finally had enough of this and forced the mines to be closed by hiring a less than reputable company to collapse the mines. The company accidentally broke into Driscoll's water table while collapsing the mines, which caused the city to go into debt trying to purify the water of silt and ore. And it wasn't until 2 years later did the water start getting better due to the efforts of the Prescotts. And without missing a beat, Kyle's phone rings. It's Kimber, and she wants the two boys to come over. Kimber was babysitting, and the boys show up at the house that Kimber was babysitting at, and it's from here that they go all out Scooby-Doo and begin questioning everything. Why did the Prescotts still care about a town that clearly didn't care about them, refused to help them find their family, and were actively working against them through the whole process? I mean, whenever the McCaskey kids got lost within the mines, the Prescotts would try to find them, but the town just blew the mines up, right? So why are the Prescotts still even here? Why do they care about Driscoll so much? What's going on here? Kimber says Phil is right. Every mystery in this town is one piece of a larger puzzle. It's all related. She then says we need to go to the source if we want answers. So remember when Phil and Mike pop out of the bushes at the lake earlier in part 4? Whenever he went on his stoner rant, he says that every mystery, every disappearance is connected and it's one big puzzle piece into a larger puzzle. And that's what Kimber is referring to right here. She then says we need to go to the source if we want answers. And that source is none other than Jimmy Prescott's dad, Thomas Prescott. However, while Kimber is saying this, Sam's attention is not on Kimber, but on the children that Kimber is babysitting. They're playing a game of tag or something, and upon one of them being touched, the youngest calls out and says, "The skinned man got you. Now you have to die." The boy who was tagged says, "Nuh-uh, Peter, I was touching the tree." To which the youngest boy, I'm guessing Peter, says, "No, you weren't. You're a liar. One of them got you. And now you have to meet the shiny gentleman." Remember, the skinned man and Borrasca is a kid's tale, something to freak young children out. But this is the first mention we get of the shiny gentleman. Similar to the skinned men, we don't know who or what this is or what it could be referring to, but it seems to be a new or forgotten detail to the urban legend of Borrasca. This detail is not very important yet, but similar to everything else, it will be, so remember it. The group agreed to go visit Tom Prescott in his hospice/nut house tomorrow. Fast forward to tomorrow, they leave right after school, get lost in the town in which the hospice is located in, but they eventually find it. The lady at the front desk says Tom hasn't had visitors since Christmas, when his son came in to check on him. They find Thomas Prescott, an old, thin man, sitting alone, whispering to himself in the hospice's sunroom. And oh boy, this guy is a frickin' treat. Kimber goes up to introduce herself to Tom, to which Tom slams his fist on the table, saying it is Mr. Thomas Prescott, and kids these days have no respect. Shut up, boomer. He says,
"You kids have no respect. Do you even know who I am? It's my son that done it. That boy's mama should have whipped him, but she was soft, and now he's running around my town spreading his vulgarity and disrespect."
clearly, he's not a big fan of his son. Doesn't seem like anyone is a fan of Jimmy at this point. Kimber responds by saying they all greatly admire Tom, and he was the one who built their town to what it is today.
"I did what I had to do."
Oh my god, yeah, I guess he did. In an attempt to try to get on Tom's good side, Kimber lies and says they are Mira McCaskey's kids.
"Huh. So you're Ada's granddaughter. That explains why you're not there."
Yo, this sentence right here gets me so mad, bro. If you knew what I knew, oh my, that would explain why you're not there. Goodness. Okay, moving on, right? And then, as if what he said couldn't get any worse, he begins to go on a tangent. And I am going to read this whole part out because everything he says right here gives us clues on what's happening in Driscoll.
"You know what I meant, young lady. They all know. They know I rescued the town. That's my town. Of course they were going to let me do anything I wanted to as long as the money kept coming in. That's why it's my town.
Is the money still coming in?
Well, you're here, aren't you? They didn't like it, but they took the money. They didn't know. Not everything. They didn't, but they suspected some. And they must have been okay with it because they kept electing Clary and they kept taking the money. It's just a powder, so unassuming. A fine, soft powder. The powder doesn't know it's bad. It doesn't know it's bad. It's just the people who say it's bad. But it needed to be done. You know that, Ada. You know we had to do it.
I know we had to do it, but it's your son. I don't think he's doing it right.
Well, of course he isn't. They were mine. He took them from me. He thought he could do it better, but he took mine and he ruined my legacy. Decades of work, and now it's all run by the powder. It's the dust of the crumbled empire.
And, of course, in typical Sam fashion, after this tangent, he begins to ask Tom about the skinned men and the triple tree. Tom claims he doesn't know what Sam is talking about and mistakes the mention of the triple tree for charging triple the price for it, which causes Tom to begin screaming at Kimber to get his son Jimmy on the phone so he can give him an earful. That whole dialogue that Tom went on hints to the most disturbing part of this entire story. And unfortunately, you don't know what it is yet. Well, I guess fortunately, I don't know. You will figure it out soon, very soon actually. The ride home was quiet, and Sam spent it trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together in his head. So much so that he didn't even notice Kyle pulling over to the side of the road. Yeah, for some reason Kyle was driving Sam's car. I don't really know why. I guess it doesn't really matter. Kyle turns around and begins to question Sam, asking him if this is really about Whitney and that he needs a good reason for why they are doing this. After all, they are getting in pretty deep at this point, and with Tom mentioning the powder, it was pretty clear to the group that this mystery involved drugs. Sam begins to question himself. Is this worth it? Is it worth involving his friends in? This wasn't their fight after all, but Sam responds to Kyle saying he has to know what really happened to Whitney. And after any more words could be said, Kimber gets a phone call from her dad. She quickly tells the boys that something happened to her mother and she's at the hospital. Kyle made the 10-mile trip to the hospital in just a couple of minutes. And upon entering the hospital, the group saw Kimber's dad and Sam's dad. Kimber's dad takes her in one direction and Sam's dad takes him in the other direction, quietly explaining to him what happened. Kimber's mom had gone grocery shopping at around 1 o'clock. She came home, put the groceries away, made 2 lasagnas and a meatloaf, put them in the freezer, got in her car, drove to the hospital, parked in the shade, took the stairs up 7 floors to the roof of the hospital, and jumped off. Lived long enough to apologize to the EMT who found her. I watched Kimber fall apart as her mother's body slowly grew cold in the morgue 1 floor beneath us. So, oh my goodness, let's unpack this. Sam wants to know what happened to Whitney. He believes that Whitney's disappearance is linked to all of the other disappearances in Drisking somehow. In an attempt to get answers, or at least some sort of lead, Kimber comes up with the idea to go talk to Thomas Prescott, the man who seemingly revived Drisking after the mines ran dry. The meeting was eventful, with Tom doing most of the talking, but the trio doesn't really learn a whole lot from him other than the mention of some powder, which the group assumes to be some sort of drug. They learn that Drisking most likely has some sort of drug operation going on within it. But just as they were leaving, Kimber gets an unexpected phone call. Turns out, Kimber's mother killed herself earlier that day by jumping off the roof of the hospital. Now we know that Kimber's mother was going through it. She was depressed before this, but Kimber never really says why. Part 3 begins with Kyle asking Sam if he thinks Kimber blames herself for her mother's death. The two of them are both shaken, with Kyle the worser of the two. I love Kyle. I really do. I love Kyle, and I would love to get an explanation on why Kimber's mom, and eventually you'll see later her dad, hate him. And I have an idea why, and I say it later, but I want to put that out there. I don't really know why Kimber's mom didn't like Kyle. Kyle's a good guy from what I can see, and definitely a good guy for Kimber, I think. Kimber had been dodging the two, and by extension, everything. She hasn't answered calls, been to school, or come to the door when they went to her house. And because Kyle and Kimber are together, Kyle feels guilty about this, saying that he needs to be there for Kimber. Kyle then talks about a suicide note and asks Sam what he thinks about it. Apparently, Kimber's dad mentioned in the hospital that his wife wrote a suicide note before she did it, but according to Sam's dad, there was no such letter. The truth was that Sam did hear Mr. DeStero say something about a letter, but he didn't want to say that to Kyle, at least not yet. The two boys felt lost without Kimber, and without her there, they had been skipping a lot of school and smoking more weed than either of them could afford, with Sam remarking he never realized how much the two relied on Kimber. The two boys decided to go to their last day of sophomore year, and to Sam's surprise, while resting his head on his desk in second period, Kimber showed up and patted Sam on his shoulder. After a long emotional hug, Sam tells Kimber that they are here for her no matter what, and says Kyle has been waiting to see her. Kimber's understandably a little nervous to see Kyle in her next period, which is completely valid. If it hasn't been obvious up to this point, Kyle is very, thematic, I guess is the right word that you can describe Kyle with. As soon as Kyle saw her from down the hall, he slammed his locker shut and walked towards us with such intensity that I began to wonder if maybe he was mad. He pushed past a dozen people without so much as glancing at them and left a curious, if annoyed, crowd in his wake. When he finally reached us, Kyle threw his backpack against the wall and swooped Kimber up in a sort of way you'd see in old black and white movies. Everyone who watched this all unfold, including me, groaned in unison. I hate that I love Kyle. Teachers weren't taking attendance, so Sam went to calculus with Kimber and Kyle, and that's where the boys finally built up enough courage to question Kimber about the suicide note that her mother may or may not have left. Kimber says she did leave a note, but her dad is lying about it to her, saying she misheard him, which Sam points out means two people misheard him, as Sam also heard the same thing come from her dad in the hospital. Kimber also says he's been her dad her whole life. She knows when he is lying. So yeah, I think it's confirmed her mother did in fact leave a suicide note, but for some reason, it's being hidden by Kimber's dad. The group end up heading out to Sam's car like they do every day for lunch and continue talking about Kimber's mother when Kimber says, "I know my dad is lying, and I know he had the letter, and I know it contains the name Prescott. I think I even know where it is." Prescott. There's that name again. And unfortunately this time, it was in someone's suicide note. As Sam puts it, I wasn't that surprised. He was the axis around which everything that was bad orbited. Of course, the typical "do you think she was having an affair" comes up, to which Kimber says no, and that she thinks that for some reason, her mother killed herself because of Kimber. She believes her mother thinks she did wrong by Kimber at some point, and that's why her mother did it. The group collectively agree that they need to read this suicide note and begin to come up with a plan to get their hands on it. Kimber says her dad keeps the note in his office that he never leaves. He has slept in his office every night since the passing of his wife. Kimber then says her mother's funeral is tomorrow and half of Drisking will be there, including her dad. So all she has to do is leave and get the note without her father noticing. She also mentions that her dad has been very cold toward her and blames her for what happened. This poor girl. Oh my goodness. I guess in every story there's got to be someone who receives like the brunt of all the bad things that happen in the story. Guts. Well, in Borrasca, it's definitely Kimber. I guess you could maybe make an argument for Kyle and Sam later on, especially Kyle. But I think Kimber gets the brunt of the trauma for sure. The plan was simple. The two boys would engage Mr. DeStero in conversation when Kyle would get a text from Kimber saying she's having a breakdown in the bathroom. Kyle would leave to go comfort her, but in reality, they are just taking Sam's car to the house to get the suicide note, while Sam would stay behind and keep an eye on Kimber's dad. And with that, they go into tomorrow's funeral with a plan. Kyle and Sam show up at the funeral and see Kimber in a corner crying, damn near already having a meltdown. She says no one's here and that her mother grew up in this town. She had hundreds of friends, but none of them came. And it turns out, yeah, seems like none of her mother's friends actually came to her funeral. Just a couple of family members, her husband, and weirdly, some cops. We also learn in this scene that Sheriff Clary, the sheriff that was introduced in part 1 of Borrasca when the group was 9, the one that said, "Well, hello, Sammy," is no longer sheriff, and someone took his position. Sam remarks that the casket in which Kimber's mother lays to rest is almost ugly and kind of insulting considering how much money the Desteros family had. The service was about to begin when Kimber said she was ready to begin the plan and she couldn't bear to be there any longer. So without hesitation, the boys jumped into action and approached Mr. Destero.
Mr. Destero, I'm very sorry to hear about your wife. She was...
A great woman who raised a wonderful daughter.
Yeah? Do great women commit suicide, leaving their wonderful daughters alone in the world? Do great women jump off of buildings and make spectacles of themselves and leave their families to deal with the publicity and the grief?
Oh, that's Kimber. Oh man, she isn't well. She says she's crying and feeling sick. I'm gonna go help her.
No! Not you. You don't help my daughter. You don't even talk to her. He can go.
Mr. Destero yelled so suddenly that Kyle dropped his phone on the ground where it made a loud clatter on the stone floors, and he pointed at me. Yo, I'm not gonna lie right now. I know Mr. Destero is probably going through it too, right? Like, his wife just did something horrible, right? But he could catch these paws any time of the day because, bro, like, I get it, your wife's gone, but I know what you did and I know why you're saying the things that you're saying, and you could catch, bruh. So now, Sam had a new mission. Get the car keys from Kyle while Kimber's dad was keeping a close eye on him for some reason. And this is another example of Kimber's parents seemingly hating Kyle, which is odd because all things considered, Kyle is just a normal teenage boy. Sam sneaks off to the meeting spot where Kyle and Kimber were supposed to meet, but doesn't find Kimber there. Sure, he was a little late, but Kimber should still be there. Sam texts Kimber and asks her where she is, and Kimber says she had to get out of there. She couldn't stand to be there any longer, and she'll be back before the end of the service, she promises. And with Sam not being able to really do anything, he waits in a bathroom stall. 20 minutes go by, and he knows the service will be ending soon, so he texts Kimber and asks her if she's on her way back yet, to no response. He watched the minutes tick by as people began to enter the bathroom, and as if to confirm his suspicion, Kyle texts Sam and says the service is over. The plan is not going as planned. Sam and Kyle end up meeting somewhere in the parking lot, and after repeated questioning from Kyle, it becomes clear Kimber is not responding to either one of their calls or texts. All the two could do now is wait around and keep an eye on Kimber's dad. However, seems like they weren't the only ones keeping an eye on her dad. 3 men were talking to Kimber's dad, ex-Sheriff Clary and 2 of his former deputies. Okay, I know y'all see that ex-Sheriff Clary, right? Ex-Sheriff Clary is no longer the sheriff of Drisking. There's a new sheriff in town. And this is important because if you remember back to what Tom Prescott said, they, most likely referring to the people of Drisking, were okay with it because they kept electing Clary and they kept taking the money. Well, Clary is no longer sheriff. So something in this Drisking drug operation that Tom started changed. Whether that being Clary getting pushed out for some reason or Clary just being too old to continue doing his job, one thing is for certain. He's not sheriff anymore. Somebody took his spot in the operation. The people of Drisking elected a new sheriff. And that somebody we know pretty well. And I think you guys know who it is from like context clues and all that. You're a smart cookie. I think you got this. Who's the only other cop that we really know of in the story? Yeah. Clary had his hand on Mr. Destero's arm and was speaking to him in an angry, hushed tone, while Kimber's dad was shaking his head and desperately objecting to something. The 2 deputies walk out the front door and Kimber's dad sagged against Clary, who sat him in a nearby chair. Something was going on. Other than like the plan, something else was going on. Kyle calls Phil Saunders and says he needs him to come pick him up ASAP, and that Kyle will owe him one. Kyle is planning on getting Phil to bring him to Kimber's house. Suddenly, Kyle's phone chirped, and Kimber's name flashed up on the screen. She says she found the note, but then Kyle warns her and says they're coming for her. I guess he's talking about Clary here, but honestly, I don't know how Kyle even comes up with the idea that Clary and the two officers are going to get Kimber. I mean, I guess he was sitting next to Mr. DeStero, so he could have overheard something that he wasn't really supposed to, but he never says anything about it to Sam or anything. Like, at this point, both Sam and the reader don't know that Clary is currently on the way to Kimber's house to stop her from reading that suicide note. I mean, I guess you can kind of guess, but Kyle pretty much pinned the tail on the donkey with this one, because Kimber's next message was, "They're here." And that's the last message they ever received from Kimber. Phil dropped the boys off at the house, and they found the front door unlocked with no one home. Sam's car was sitting in the driveway, unlocked, with keys in the ignition. And after repeated phone calls from Kyle, Kimber has not answered her phone once. After about a half hour of begging from Kyle, Sam finally called his dad. He told her that Kimber is missing, and he believes ex-Sheriff Clary and his ex-deputies had something to do with it. Sam's dad tells him to come down to the station and they'll take a statement from the boys and send a couple of officers over to investigate. Sam hung up and violently threw the car in reverse.
Sam, how do we know? How do you know we can trust the cops?
I'm not trusting the cops. I'm trusting my dad.
Sam turns into the sheriff's office and the two boys get out of the car. They enter the building and are led into a room so they can get their statements taken. After a couple minutes, Sam's dad walks in and reveals to the boys that the cops believe the DeStero family left town voluntarily. Of course, the boys are outraged. There's no way Kimber would just leave town, right? Sam's dad then says it's not up to Kimber. She's legally a minor, so if her dad says they are leaving, then they're leaving. I also forgot to mention this part, right? So after the service ends, ex-Sheriff Clary could be seen leading Mr. DeStero out of the building. Now, only minutes after seeing this is when Sam and Kyle leave the funeral and show up to the DeStero house and find nobody. This means that if Kimber and her father left town, they had to do it incredibly fast. So fast that they could not pack any clothes. They would have just had to get into a car and dip. They had time to do damn near nothing. But that still doesn't really explain why Kimber's no longer answering her phone. Regardless of anything, just like everything in this town, the situation is fishy. Something's happening here. Something is going on, and the two boys know it. After a dialogue that I would love to read, but I'm not because I could just explain it, we learn that Sam, throughout the years, has always thought that his father did not do enough to find Whitney after her disappearance. Sam's dad confronts him about this, to which Kyle questions Sam's dad about the officers that left the service to go after Kimber. Remember, Clary and his ex-deputies were there talking to Mr. DeStero before suddenly rushing out the door. Sam's dad says he sent them out on a call, which makes Sam stand up and violently knock over the chair he was sitting in. Exactly, that's why I was a little confused. Like, why did Kyle automatically jump to them coming to get Kimber? Like, there was no evidence that we know of to make him think this. I guess you can kind of assume that they were leaving to go get Kimber, but still, I think it's a far fetch on Kyle's part, but it's true. They went to go get Kimber.
All right, that's enough. I told you I would tell you what I know, and I have. I understand your friend is important to you, and god damn it, the DeSteros are friends of mine too. I promise you that I will use the full extent of my resources to track them down and put your minds at ease. But until then, all I can offer you is the assurance that there is no sign of foul play at this time. You boys need to get off the warpath and let us handle this. Now Ramirez is waiting in the hall to take your statements, and then both of you are going home. Understood?
Sam and Kyle left the sheriff's office, seething with rage. Kyle begins to cry once he gets in the car and says that Sam's dad is lying. Kimber's gone. She's at the place where bad things happen. The two are now fully convinced that Borrasca is real. There are too many disappearances in Drisking for something not to be happening. Too many of their loved ones have disappeared over the years. Borrasca is real.
Kimber's gone, like the others. So she's at the place where bad things happen.
No. No. Not Kimber. No.
Yes, Sam, fucking think about it. It's the treehouse. It's all the same. Borrasca, the skinned men, the triple tree, your sister, the mountain. It's all the fucking same. It's the Prescott Empire, and now Kimber has been fucking consumed by it.
Once again, there's that sentence. She's at the place where bad things happen. I consider that simple sentence right there to be one of the most terrifying sentences a single person could ever read. She's being held in a CIA black site. That sentence is pretty bad, right? However, we're being told where she's being held, so we can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. She's probably being interrogated and tortured and forced to stay in these uncomfortable positions for a really long time, waterboarded, things of that nature. We know what this girl may be going through, and while that thought is still absolutely horrifying, I still believe she's at the place where bad things happen is still so much worse. Once again, this sentence allows your imagination to flow. And I know I already pretty much hit the nail on the head earlier with this one, but I want to swing back to it. This is what I believe to be the best part of the entire story. The tension at this point is so high, and there are so many questions that it just makes you feel off. I, for one, had to step away from the story many times at this point because of how it made me feel. And I think that's how you know you have a good story on your hands. When you start to get a little emotional and you start to get emotionally involved with the characters within the story. The only way I can explain it is that feeling you get after waking up from a really weird dream. The rest of your day is just off, or I guess the better word would be different. You can't really explain it. And that's exactly how a really good story like this one makes me feel. The only other story that has made me feel similar to how I feel about this story is Berserk. I know I already mentioned Guts earlier. And although both stories are very different from one another, Berserk has also made me walk away from it a couple times to process all the information and emotion that is being thrown at me. And also like all of just the horrible, sick acts that occur within it. Whatever. And this is exactly what Sam and Kyle are going through right now, except they can't really walk away. Whitney has been missing for 9 whole years with zero closure. Sam knows almost nothing about the situation, yet all he can think about is that she may have went to the place where bad things happen. Sam asks Kyle what they should do next, and Kyle says where it all starts and ends, at the Triple Tree. And to add salt to the wound, Officer Grigg, one of the cops that was at Kimber's mother's funeral with Clary, taps on Sam's window and tells the two boys to move along home. But they didn't go home. They went to the Triple Tree. Similar to how they went to the Triple Tree 9 years earlier to try to find Whitney. Except this time, they were down a man. By the time they got there, the sun was going down. And while they were going up the trail toward the tree, they saw Parker, Kyle's brother, and a couple of their friends coming down the trail. Sam nodded at them, but Kyle said nothing. And with the little light they had left, they searched around the Triple Tree. It took about a half hour in the darkness before Sam was finally able to convince Kyle there was nothing there. And the entire time they were doing this, although they never said it, both of them were scared, terrified even. Not only was it dark, but they both knew they could hear the piercing, scraping, grinding metal screams of Borrasca at any point, which most likely meant Kimber would be dead. The two leave, and Sam drops Kyle off. And with a slight nod, Kyle disappears into his house. They agreed to go look for Kimber tomorrow morning. Sam gets home and finds his dad sitting at the kitchen table. Sam's dad begins to apologize to Sam for what happened at the office and says Anne, Kimber's mom, has been very depressed for a very long time, and that depression can take a toll on someone. Sam pretty much ignores him before asking his dad if he and his officers are still trying to find Kimber. Sam's dad assures him that they are, and for the first time in a very long time, Sam actually believed him. Frickin' sucker, no way you actually believe this dude, bruh. The next morning, Sam goes to Kyle's house, but this time, Parker came out to meet Sam. He tells Sam that Kyle is not here, and that he stole their dad's truck earlier this morning. Sam spent the rest of the morning looking for Kyle, and it wasn't until noon that Kyle finally answered his phone. Kyle says he couldn't sleep, and he's currently up in the mountains somewhere looking for Kimber. He says she's somewhere in these woods. He can feel it. The two then agree to meet at the West Rim Trail, the trail that leads to the Triple Tree. And upon meeting there, Kyle and Sam spend the rest of the day and the next few days after looking for Kimber up on that mountain. With each day, Kyle and Sam grew more desperate, and the Destero house remained as cold and as empty as the space between the stars above it. The last words we can read in part 3 are this: "On the 11th night of our Kimberless existence, I awoken out of a troubled sleep by the piercing, whirling, screeching sound of death at Borrasca. I cried myself back to sleep to the tortured sounds of Kyle's own agony next door. We had failed her. Kimber was dead." At this point in the story, the boys have began to associate that sound that they hear, the sound that comes from Borrasca, as someone dying there. Which, sure, I guess so, whatever. Let's continue. And with that, we're going to jump right into part 4. If you need a recap, should have paid attention, bud. Sorry. Bro, I literally just realized that my light has been in the camera the entire time. Look, I want to apologize to y'all. I know the setup is just all types of messed up. I'm trying my best over here. Part 4 picks up right where we left off. The next day, when Sam went to meet Kyle at his house, it was clear Kyle had snapped. His skin was yellow, and his voice was flat, void of emotion.
It's not over yet, Kyle.
Yes, it is, Sam.
No, I don't believe that. Kimber's dad is missing too, you know. Maybe it was him instead that was...
We're living in hell. Drisking. It's hell in our own reality. Sam says he couldn't disagree. Whitney hadn't been an outlier like he'd originally thought. Missing people were the norm here. Kyle begins to scream about Jimmy Prescott, saying if Drisking is hell, then Jimmy is Satan himself. Sam isn't so convinced though. He says the Prescotts are just running drugs and mentions the powder that Tom talked about when the group went to visit him.
Yeah, and so what? He's recruiting people to be drug mules or something?
Maybe.
I agreed for Kyle's sake, though I didn't really believe it. The sound the great beast machine of Borrasca gave off the distinct stench of death, and though I knew that physically that was impossible, it didn't change my mind about it. The air smelt different after the metallic wailing ended. The boys stop at a corner store for their usual monsters and rock stars when Sam spots Mira waiting for some coffee at the end of the bar. Sam remarks that she looks like she is in a good mood, and it was probably a good time to tell her he was calling out of work for the 5th day in a row. When Sam approached her, Mira was unusually happy, something that we've never seen from her before. And when Sam says he's not going into work today, Mira asks him what's so important that is making him call out for days in a row. Sam draws a blank, and Kyle answers for him. He says they're trying to find Borrasca. Mira says that's just a kid's story, but good luck, and the boys exit the store. They get into the car, and Kyle remarks that he does not like Sam's boss. Something's off-putting about her, especially the way she acted in this scene is odd. So far, we haven't really seen Mira happy, so it was quite weird. The two boys then question if Borrasca is a place or a thing and come up with a plan to talk to Catherine again, the woman at the Historic Preservation Society of Drisking office, the same woman that gave the group information on Tom Prescott. And here is where we finally begin to get some answers. The whole story has been building up to this point, so get your big boy pants on. I hope you're ready for this. They go to her office and get right to the point. They want to know what Borrasca is, if it's a place or a thing. Catherine raised her eyebrow and says that Borrasca is a local legend amongst the kids in the area, but it's both. She says that the term Borrasca is just an old, outdated word used by miners. It's used to describe the first mine in the system to run dry. The boys question this and say they've been looking at all the mines in the area, but they may have just had a breakthrough. If they could find the first mine that ran dry near Drisking, then they may be able to find Borrasca. The boys asked Catherine which mine was the first to run dry, and after a lot of digging through folders and paperworks, they find out the first mine to close was the North Central Mine, which was also the first mine to open. They are then able to find the location of this mine from a map Catherine had. Sam remarks that this mine was at least 4 miles from where they'd been looking. They ask if they could keep the map, to which Catherine agrees, and the two book it out of there. Kyle says they should get a gun for obvious reasons. Probably something supernatural happening over there. I mean, there's men with no skin, like, just walking around, probably killing people, right? Whatever. But they have no readily available way to get one. So instead, they come up with the plan to go out there, scout it out, and then come back with a gun. After studying the map for some time, it becomes clear to the boys the easiest way to access the mine was still through the West Rim Prescott Ore Trail, the Triple Tree Trail. They just had to hike in a different direction. And that's what they do. They pass the Triple Tree and hike north for 4 whole hours. Sam had begun to regret going out there with no food or anything, and then, just as the sun reached the apex of the day, they found it, an emptiness through the trees, and the hard line of a man-made building. Kyle began to run towards the buildings, and upon breaking the tree line, Sam choked on his own breath and fell back against a tree. He saw a large wooden sign near the entrance of the mine that was almost as long as the entire clearing that the buildings were in. Sam remarks the sign had to be a century old, and though most of the letters were rotted off over the years, he could guess the sign once said Drisking Underground Mine. But now, all that was left was Skin ND Min. Skinned men. This is it. This is what they have been looking for. This is it. This is what they've been looking for. The skinned men wasn't actually skinned men in the traditional sense, but a sign in front of an abandoned mine with some buildings in front of it. And by some buildings, I mean several large buildings, with some even being 2 stories tall. This place clearly was not abandoned. The boys agree that they should probably search the largest building first. They both counted to 3 and ran across the clearing to the large wooden doors of an old 2-story building. They were cracked open, and when we squeezed inside, I had no doubts that death was indeed present in Borrasca. The boys were standing in what Sam guessed to be a refinery, and in the middle of the room was a large cone-shaped machine. This machine had a conveyor belt fed into it, and Sam remarks the room had an extremely sour smell to it, and the dirt beneath their feet seemed to have taken on a crimson tint.
This is the machine. This is where they take them. This is the place where people die.
Kimber isn't there, so they leave the building, and just as they leave, they see none other than Jimmy Prescott's recently waxed shiny green pickup truck in one of the parking spots in front of one of the buildings. The boys began to commando crawl around the camp and spot a 1-story brown building that was only a couple of feet away from them. They get into a crouched stance and walk nearby one of the windows to the building. As soon as I reached the wall next to him, Kyle whirled around and put another finger to his lips, then pointed up to a window directly above us. There were noises coming from inside, and even to me, a 16-year-old virgin, the sounds of sex were unmistakable. We can hear an animalistic grunting and the tired, objecting groans of an old mattress. Unable to help myself, I whispered, "What the fuck?" to Kyle, but he was already gone, all caution abandoned, running around the side of the building. I followed him through the first door, and we came upon and was hit in the face by an invisible wall of filth and suffering. The smell knocked me back, but Kyle kept running. I followed him in, past crates of ramen noodles, MREs, bottled waters, and boxes I had no time to read. I crossed another threshold and was suddenly surrounded by people. So many people. I skidded to a halt, and I realized I was standing in a sort of dorm. Rows and rows of beds on either side of me with people strapped to them, some of them wearing dirty rags and some wearing nothing at all. Many seemed to be bloated, and I waited for one to call out to me, but all they did was remain silent. Some watching me through tired, dead eyes, and others turning away. Looking around, I realized they were all women, and the bloating I saw seemed to be pregnancies. Some were confined to their beds, and others were not. I looked around the room for Kyle and saw him standing a little further in the long room, looking back at me with the same confused, wild expression I was sure was on my face. I saw the realization cross his and called out to him, but he was already running again.
I lost him before I'd taken 5 steps to follow. I figured it was probably best to just keep running, spread out and look for Kimber. I didn't see her in this room, and I was sure she would call out to us if she was. I looked around for another door and saw one cracked open on the left behind a row of beds. I stared straight at it as I made my way there, desperate to avoid the wretched, void eyes of the women around me. First we helped Kimber, then we helped the others. I will come back and help you all, I promise, as soon as I find Kimber. Without a thought, I pushed the door wide open as soon as I had reached it and found the source of the noises we'd heard outside. It was Jimmy, something I'd been expecting to see, but the scene before me was not. He was hunched over the bed of an almost unrecognizable, unresponsive Christy, treating her like an animal. She watched me through the slits of her dead eyes, but she didn't call to me for help. I thought I saw a tear run down her cheek before she turned her face away from me to face the wall on the other side. What the fuck? I didn't even realize the words were audible. I had never seen this depth of human suffering. Jimmy's head snapped around to look at me and briefly registered surprise before he smiled at me in a way that turned my insides to ice. He didn't stop what he was doing, and I wanted nothing more than to run over and push him off of Christy, but to my utter shame, I couldn't force myself to come any further into the room.
Sam! Sam!
Kyle's voice echoed through the building and immediately cured me of my paralysis. I found myself running back into the miners' dorm and away from Jimmy Prescott and Christy. Kyle!
Back here! Hurry, please! I found Kimber!
I followed his voice through the maze of beds and rooms as a cacophony of voices began to follow me.
Help. Help us, please.
There were maybe only a handful of girls yelling at me, but it sounded thunderously loud as it filtered through my guilt. The weight of their misery dropped down upon me, and it almost pushed me into the ground. I'll get help, I'll help you, I promise. I promised them as I followed Kyle's voice, still screaming desperately from an adjacent room. I sprinted across another threshold and saw him, hunched down near a corner bed, helplessly yanking at a leather strap attached to it. I slammed into the bed and fell to my knees, trying to work out what he was doing and how I could help him. I tried not to look at the bed because I knew I couldn't see her like that. I couldn't bear it. If Kimber looked at me through those same accusing, empty eyes as Christy and the others, I might lay down on the ground beneath her and curl up into a ball.
Go around the other side. Unbuckle the other 2 straps.
Kyle had the high-pitched voice and wild, desperate eyes of madness. I ran around the other side and did as he'd said with shaking, awkward hands. Oh, boys! Jimmy's voice rang out from somewhere in the building. I had just freed Kimber's ankle and was working on her wrist. She whimpered when she heard him and buried her face in my shoulder. Do you think you're hiding? I know where to find you. I know right where I put that girl.
Kyle is now seething with rage, screaming at Jimmy as he unbinds Kimber from the bed that she has undoubtedly been molested on countless times at this point. Free Kimber and had to pull her up off the bed. Her legs could not support her weight as she was heavily sedated. They braced her on either side and moved as quickly as they could through the nearest doorway, away from Jimmy Prescott.
We were in another dorm, though this one was filled with mostly empty beds. I could see sunlight shining through the door at the end of the long room, and we raced toward it as Kimber made little cries of pain. I didn't think my heart could break anymore, but I was wrong, because in the next moment, it did. I almost dropped Kimber when I saw her staring at me. Her eyes were hollow and uninvested, and when I turned toward her, she looked away immediately, as if she couldn't stand the sight of me. Whitney, I said weakly.
Sam, let's fucking go!
Kyle screamed. I can't. I turned toward him as tears ran down my hot cheeks, and Kyle saw her too.
I can't stay,
Kyle said, still moving toward the door.
I have to get Kimber away from here, please.
But he knew I wasn't going anywhere now. Good luck, bro, I said, and then we were both running in different directions. Whitney's hair was long, but it was thin, as was her face. Everything on her looked brittle, except for her stomach, which bubbled out from her like an overblown balloon. She refused to look at me and flinched at my touch as I tried desperately to unbuckle her from the bed. I hadn't even finished the first buckle when I heard Jimmy walk up behind me. I didn't bother to look at him or stop trying to free my sister. I didn't know what else to do. I admire your grit, kid. You probably think your friends got away, but there's no sense in false hope, is there?
There's no sense in any of this.
You're wrong about that, but just so you know, I got Cleary out there looking for them already. People making a lot of noise coming down off this mountain. Trust me on that. Sheriff Cleary? I was desperate to keep him talking. Anything to keep him from trying to stop me. Oh yeah, you know, he was supposed to retire from the business, but unlike the previous sheriff, he kept a few horses in the race. Horses? Yep. We call these buildings the stables. Do you want to know what this is, Sam? It's all about the babies. You wouldn't believe how much money is in the industry. I mean, my dad was a smart man, and he knew we didn't have anything of value to sell, and back then the Prescotts were dirt poor, out-of-work miners just like everyone else in town. He first got the idea when he sold my older brother off to pay for the legal fees to fight the city. I mean, some people will pay 5 figures for a newborn, you know, even back then. And the organizations that buy them, well, they buy in bulk. But we still make a killing off of them, and our overhead is very low. Jimmy stood up and pulled a gun out of his waistband, then threw it on a bed across the aisle. You know, try to understand, Sammy, it's not about the money. We use the stables for community services too. Lots of people in the town come to us, you know, ever since the 50s.
During this dialogue, Sam ended up freeing Whitney from her restraints, but Whitney didn't run. She was too sedated to. And the fact that Whitney is one of the few women in this specific room, mostly by herself, makes this whole scene to me that much more disturbing. In my sick, twisted mind, I think Jimmy, or one of the regulars from the town, has singled out Whitney as their own little plaything, which is horrifying to me. And when I think about the tortures and suffering this poor young lady has had to go through over the past 9 years, I get sick to my stomach. She has clearly been starved, with her body being brittle and small, except for the large gut in which she holds a baby that she never wanted.
What are you waiting for? Why don't you just kill me? This isn't a James Bond movie. I don't care about any of this shit. Kill you? Christ, kid. If I could, then I already would have, but I'm not allowed to kill you. I've been trying to decide if I want to fuck your sister right in front of you, though. She's not one of mine, but it might be worth it just to see your face. I can't let her go, you little fuck. She's got one of our community services babies in her. Grace says she's got another week, but she's been putting out shit babies, though. And as soon as this one's out of her, she's got a date with the shiny gentleman.
At this point, I think it is very clear the kind of man Jimmy Prescott is. Just then, he gets a phone call, and ex-Sheriff Cleary pulls up to the building with a bloody, limping Kyle in front of him. Jimmy asks Cleary where's the girl, referring to Kimber, to which Cleary says he doesn't have all day to look around for her, and Jimmy will just have to get that information out of Kyle. Jimmy then tortures Kyle, breaking his ribs and ankles. And after a long couple of minutes, and Sam just watching Kyle getting his teeth knocked out of his mouth, Sam gets up and charges Jimmy. Before he could get to Jimmy, though, Cleary restrains Sam and forces Sam to watch Jimmy spit on Kyle, raise his foot up over Kyle's face, and stomp on it with so much force that Kyle's skull breaks. After a brief intermission, Cleary tells Sam that if he wants to save his friend, then he must leave and bring him to a hospital. Cleary tosses Sam the keys to his truck, and without looking at the men, Sam picks Kyle up, Kyle's face a collage of pulp and blood, and begins dragging Kyle to Clary's truck. Sam knew the men were lying to him. Kyle was dead. Sam sped down the mountain and into the hospital's emergency zone, where he was met with a medical team waiting for him. Apparently, someone called them, and they were expecting Sam and Kyle. Nobody came to take a statement from Sam or ask any questions, and eventually, Kyle's mom and Sam's dad arrive at the hospital. Sam's dad drives him home in silence, but Sam couldn't take it.
Is anyone going to file a police report? Does anyone even fucking care what happened? Sam, I'm doing my best to do damage control on the situation, but if Kyle dies or his parents sue, There's nothing I can do to keep you out of court.
You think I did this?
We're not going to tell your mother, all right? She has enough to worry about.
Dad, Kimber, it was fucking Prescott and Sheriff Clary.
Yes, you arrived at the hospital in Killian's truck. We already talked to them both. Samuel, we will never speak of this again. Do you understand?
Are you fucking kidding me, Dad? Kyle might fucking die. I saw Kimber.
Enough! If you want this to go away, you will keep your mouth shut about it. Make no statements to anyone, and I'll hire the best lawyer I can afford to clean up your mess. I don't know why you beat your best friend almost to death, and frankly, I don't want to. Fuck you!
Sam threw open the door and ran away. He ran away from his dad, his house, his mother, his broken life. And Sam's dad never came after him. Not that day or any other. Everyone now thought Sam was a violent criminal. Prescott's crimes being pinned on him. He chose to drain the last of his savings paying for a room at a motel far outside of town. Sam checked the newspaper every morning for mention of Kyle's condition until one day, Sam sees in the paper that Mira and Owen Daly just had a newborn baby that they named William. The whirling, twirling, shiny gentleman lit up the valley with its stench and a song of death that night. According to what Prescott said, Whitney is almost certainly dead, and the baby that she was harboring most likely went to Mira and Owen, which was undoubtedly pre-planned, by the way. If you remember in part 2, it's revealed Mira is very depressed that her and Owen cannot have a baby. But the last time Sam sees Mira, she is unreasonably happy, acting odd. I believe when she came out and told Owen, I want to do it, I called him, she was referring to Prescott. She wanted to buy a baby boy. Yeah, so that happened. I think that all those conversations Jimmy and Mira were having about exactly this, Mira was buying a baby from Borrasca, since her and Owen could not create one themselves. Sam stayed in Drisking long enough after the money ran out and slept on the concrete behind the local motel. He wanted to stick around until Kyle was released from the hospital, and when Kyle finally was released, he was mute, a soulless vegetable, a shell of his former self. Seems that Prescott beat the life out of Kyle. Sam went to Kyle's house and threatened Parker until Parker let Sam into the house. Once Sam confirmed that the Kyle he knew was no longer there, he hitchhiked out of town. Sam spent the next 4 years in Chicago in a drunken, drug-fueled state, when one day he received a letter. It didn't have a return address, but it was postmarked California. The handwriting of the letter was unmistakable to Sam. It was Kimber's handwriting, and this is what he read. My Kimber, I know you aren't going to understand why we did the things we did. It was all born out of love. At least it started that way. You're everything to me, and you'll always be my daughter. Do you understand? And I'm leaving this world because of what I've done to you, not because of what you are. I don't want you to be upset about what you are, because who you are is beautiful. My dearest, this town has done horrible things, and all of us who live here are guilty. Read this letter and leave this place. I need to tell you all of this. I need to start at the beginning. Somewhere along the way, decades ago, the major population of Drisking became unable to bear children. Most people blame the town for letting the iron ore leak into our water table during the collapsing of our mines. This is the same water table that still provides the town water today. They were never quite able to fix it, and ore is toxic and exposure causes infertility. The town did, and still does, suffer greatly from its effects. And the Prescotts, they solved the problem that no one could solve. It was an ugly, crass solution, but most people were happy to look away when they were able to raise families again. You see, they took girls, mostly women from other places, and they impregnated them and gave us their babies. And the town came under the care of Thomas Prescott when he started to sell some of the babies on the side for a profit to rich couples. And the sheriff, he helped him do this. But then an ugly rumor started that they were selling to human traffickers, and the Prescotts had to offer triple the price for girls. And in town, we began to murmur. But we once again turned the other cheek when the city was suddenly flooded with money because of how well the traffickers paid. People had well-paying jobs again, and were proud to call Drisking home. So we said nothing, and those that did were taken to the mountain. Because that is where they do it. There is a place on the mountain where the women are taken, Kimber. Drifters, runaways, and if their parents choose it, sometimes the girls in town are even sold back. They arrange to sell the girls, and they meet them at a tree halfway between our town and their baby mill. Sometimes kids play there now. I think you played there. The Prescotts and the sheriff are the ones who impregnate the girls, and the children are named after them. P children for Prescotts and K children for the sheriff. And when the women become too sick or too old to deliver profitable babies, they are sent through a giant machine that was used to refine ore, and their bodies are crushed and the blood and skin stripped away. What remains of them are their stolen children and the dust of their bones. And all that's left of them is the powder that they spread over the mountains to hide our crimes. I'm telling you this, Kimber, because you are one of those children. Most of your friends are one of those children. Please get out of Drisking before your father finds this letter. Run away and never come back, and never speak of it to anyone. Their industry has deep roots, and the traffickers have lofty connections. Don't tell anyone. Don't keep this letter. Don't look back. I love you. I'm sorry I have to leave you. We all have to answer for our sins, and I'm ready to burn in hell for mine. Love you always and forever. Mom. Oh my good Lord. Okay. This is the suicide note that Kimber's mom left. And with it, we can finally paint a full picture of what really happened in Drisking. Sometime in the past, Drisking was not doing very well. Their mines ran dry, and with it being a mining town, people quickly began to leave because there was no more money coming in. During this time, 4 kids known as the McCaskey kids went into an abandoned mine and got lost within it, eventually succumbing to the elements. This was the straw that broke the camel's back for the town of Drisking, and although a well-known local family known as the Prescotts were still searching for the McCaskey kids deep within the mines, the town's government decided it's best to collapse all of the mines in the area so incidents like this do not occur again. Unfortunately, however, the town hired a less than reputable company to collapse the mines, and in doing so, accidentally contaminated the town's drinking water with ores that made the majority of the population infertile. The population of Drisking, understandably, didn't like this, so a man named Thomas Prescott took matters into his own hands. His methods, however, were ugly and disturbing. He, along with the sheriff, most likely Clary or Clary's predecessor, began taking girls, mostly women from other towns, and began to impregnate them, and gave the population of Drisking their babies. The population knew this. They knew what Tom and the sheriff were doing, but they didn't care. The idea of having babies and starting a family were so enticing to them that they turned the other cheek. Eventually, Tom Prescott became so reputable due to this that he took over the town and began selling some of the babies he and the sheriff were making on the side to rich couples. But rumors around town began to spread that they were actually selling some of the babies to human traffickers, which allowed Tom to increase the price of the babies they were selling. With the sudden flood of money in town, everyone was more than happy to turn the other cheek on what they were doing. They were down bad for so long. No money, no work, infertile. At this point, they were desperate and were willing to let just about anything happen if it meant they could start a family. People were proud to call Drisking home again, and those that weren't were taken to the mountain. They were taken to a place called Borrasca, or the stables, as Jimmy puts it. Borrasca, a collapsed mine, is where Tom and the sheriff did all of their business. This is where the women are taken after they are kidnapped to be drugged, chained to a bed, and repeatedly raped so Tom and Clary can sell off the offspring. And when these women are past their prime and can no longer create suitable babies, they are sent through a giant machine that was used to once refine ore, but is now used to crush the bodies and bones of the poor victims of Tom and the sheriff. This machine is called the Shiny Gentleman. This is the same machine that Sam and Kyle see when they first enter Borrasca. Remember, in the sour-smelling room and the crimson tint dirt? Yeah, underneath it? Yeah, it's the same machine. The Shiny Gentleman turns the victims' bodies into a dust, which Tom and the sheriff began to spread over the mountains so they could hide their crimes. This was the powder that Tom was referring to whenever the trio went to go talk to him, except the trio mistook this for drugs. In reality, it was so much worse than drugs. Oh my goodness. The Shiny Gentleman is also the source of the loud metallic screeching that can be heard throughout the town occasionally. Whenever it goes off, a poor woman's body is being crushed because they are no longer of any use to the two men. Tom and the sheriff would arrange to sell the girls and meet their customers at a tree about halfway between Drisking and the now collapsed mine Borrasca. This tree is the Triple Tree, where children go to play and carve their names. As the years went by, Tom began to get older and eventually was put in a hospice about 40 minutes outside of town, and his son, Jimmy Prescott, took over the family business, with Clary, while no longer sheriff, still hanging around. And unfortunately, Sam, Kyle, and Kimber get caught up in it all. Also of note, Kimber's mother says that most of the children in Drisking come from this operation that the Prescotts and the sheriff are running. And you can tell which kids are whose by their names. P for Prescott, K for Clary. So Kyle and Kimber's dad is Clary, while Parker, Kyle's little brother's dad, is either Tom or Jimmy. And the same can be said for every other kid that grew up with the trio. Phil Saunders, Christy, are all offsprings of this method. The unfortunate but disturbing truth is that almost all of the kids of Drisking were born from this depraved, brutal method of repopulation. And I have to say this. Number one, although it's never directly stated, I think at this point, Sam's dad, which we learn later in the story is named Graham Walker, is most likely the sheriff at this point in the story. Remember how I was saying, you're a smart cookie, all that? Yeah, he's the sheriff at this point. We know right after the time skip between part 1 and 2 that Clary was sheriff when Sam first moved to town when he was 9. But by the time Sam was 16, Clary was no longer sheriff. And I'm pretty sure Clary stepped down and Sam's dad took that sheriff position that Clary once had. This is also confirmed in part 5, which is the next part we're about to read, but it's never outright said through parts 2 and 4. So I want to make it clear right now, Graham Walker, Sam's dad, was the sheriff during this time. So just understand, during parts 2 through 4, Graham, Sam's dad, is the sheriff. He has his hand in the Borrasca operation, or undoubtedly knows something about it. And that brings me right into my next point. Now, some of you may have already connected the dots, but if you have not, get ready, all right? Clary had deep roots in this whole Borrasca human trafficking scene. And with him stepping down and Sam's dad, Graham, taking the sheriff's position of Drisking, I think it's safe to say that Graham was also involved in Borrasca at this point. That would explain him never being home and always working, even though Drisking never really had anything going on, right? So at the end of part 4, it's revealed that Mira and Owen has a new baby named William. And remember, from Kimber's mom's suicide note, she tells us that the Prescotts and the sheriff are the ones that impregnate the girls, and the children are named after them. P for Prescott, K for the sheriff. Now, I ask you this. What happens if the sheriff changes? Do the names of the children that they get from the girls they impregnate change too? I think they do. Mira's baby boy is named William. Sam's dad's name is Graham Walker. I think you see what I'm getting at here. I believe, and it's also revealed that Sam believes this later on in the story in part 5, that his father was the one who was impregnating Whitney, and that she was one of his horses. My goodness, bro. I don't really know why he would do this, but I believe it to be some sort of initiation that Prescott and Clary made Sam's dad do in order to be accepted by them and be allowed into the Borrasca operation. Whitney disappeared pretty early on in the story, not even a year in, so it would make sense that Sam's dad had to do this in order to prove his loyalty to the operation. And I guess if you're willing to do something like that once, I think doing that for the remainder of the poor girl's life is just okay with you. Also, this note may explain a lot of other slightly less important things to us. For example, this may explain why Kimber's parents always hated Kyle even though he was just a normal teenage boy. I believe, personally, Kimber's parents were doing pretty bad financially, so they opted to sell Kimber back to Borrasca so they could get some money for her. But they saw Kyle as a problem because of how much he liked Kimber. After all, I mean, if your girlfriend or boyfriend just randomly disappears one day, you're going to cause a scene. You're going to cause a problem, which makes me think Kimber's parents were trying to get Kyle to break up with Kimber so they could sell her off nice and quiet. Kimber's mom clearly felt guilty about this, but Kimber's dad, I don't think so. I think he knew. And I believe whenever we see him at the funeral when he slumps down into the chair after talking to Clary, that indicates one of two things. Either the guilt of selling his daughter back into sex trafficking just hit him randomly at his wife's funeral, or Clary told him if Kimber finds out the truth, then they will take her back to Borrasca. It's most likely the latter. Look, I'll put my hand up and say it's most likely the latter, but I am choosing to believe the first because I like Kyle, and I need an explanation on why Kimber's parents hated him, because I thought that he was a good guy. I hate saying I thought he was. I liked Kyle. I did. And I think right here is where I'm going to end this video off. Once again, there is a part 5 of Borrasca, but it is about as long as the previous 4 parts combined, so I think it's best to just make its own separate video. If you are watching this video after I get part 5 of Borrasca up, I highly recommend you do not watch the full video yet. Sit with this video, sit with this story for right now, and think about it. There's something special about a really good story like Borrasca, especially something so twisted and dark. For the remainder of the day, you may have this weird feeling, a slight edge, a slight tinge of anxiety, and this story may be in the back of your head. You may think about the characters and events within Borrasca. Sit with that. Let it sink in. Give yourself some time to unwind. Maybe do some research on the actual Borrasca saga. And when you feel ready, come back and watch part 5. And with that being said, thank you all for watching.
you.